Hello, everybody, and welcome. Happy Monday night. Yeah, welcome to EKF Live. Happy Monday night, everybody. It's hopefully you're all settling into like this. I don't know if it's officially fall yet or whatever kind of weather we're having, but yeah. Happy Monday night, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. And tonight we have a special guest on with us. We have Todd Brothers. Todd, congratulations on your big win on the Kennebec.
Thank you.
Yeah. How's it going, Todd?
Great. How are you guys doing?
Good. John, I think your mic's muted. Just a heads up. Yeah, good now? Okay. Cool.
Yeah, good.
All right, Todd. So first off, I know we said this already, but I'll say it again. Congratulations on your win on the Kennebec. what a cool event. Like, that was a really cool event to just kind of watch and observe, but also be around. And then seeing the river that I feel like, John, Ken, and I have been hyping up for the better part of a year now. Seeing it kind of, show out, and I think a pretty good way, was really cool. But Todd, I want to give you a second to give you a chance to introduce yourself to the crew here, to everybody who's watching. Tell us a little bit about yourself, like how you got started in kayak fishing, your sort of journey to getting to this point, and how long you've been fishing EKF. And it's okay if you don't remember all of those. I'm just trying to give you some general talking points. So,
alrighty. Again, I'm Todd Brothers. I've been fishing on and off, my whole life. My father and uncle always did fishing, but it consisted mostly of, when I was younger, we used to go to the shore a lot, stripers and bluefish. And now it's kind of like grab the 12-foot John boat, throw it in a little pond, and just run the bank with whatever. So then COVID hit, and everybody's sitting at home doing nothing. I grab my poles one day and decide I'm just going to go fish from the bank somewhere. And I see this guy in a kayak going across the lake fishing. I said, damn, that's a pretty good idea. So I thought to myself, I'm going to grab one of those little kayaks and try it out. And that was in 2021. My first tournament with MAKB was in the fall of 22, and not having any clue what I was getting into. And when I got there at my first tournament, it was sold out, 25 guys there with some nice rigs. And I said, whoa, this is a little more than I thought it was going to be. And then you start looking at YouTube and everything, like, holy cow, this is a thing, So I did that, and immediately, so I fished two events at MAKB, and immediately the next year I jumped into EKF and did every tournament in last year in 23. Some I did okay, some I really struggled, but I kind of wanted that in a way, to see what it was going to be like, these nationally known anglers, and to fish on the same waters with these guys, to just to kind of compare myself, to see what I needed to improve on, and maybe some things that I was good at. And it definitely was a big time learning experience, watching everybody else and just going through it. And last year I fished 16 tournaments, 16 live events. This year, to start the season, I told myself, said maybe tone it down a little bit and focus and do a little more pre-fishing. Well, this year I did 18 events. So that's how that went.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That went.
I've seen you at quite a bit of them. I was like, I think you did more than 16.
Yeah. So it's been kind of a crazy year, but we're having a good time with it. So
if any of our spouses are watching, they've heard this story. But it's amazing. It's amazing to hear that, like, how it just catches on so quick, right? And kudos to you for just putting yourself out there and getting involved. I can't imagine. I've been fishing tournaments for a while, like kayak tournaments for a while now. I can't imagine approaching the sport as it is now. When I got started, it was like, to drill a hole in your kayak for a rod holder was like, you just ruined your kayak, right? Which, so now it's like, if you have any less than 6 holes in your kayak that you drilled yourself, like, are you even rigging that kayak?
Yeah.
But we've all had. I think, well, I've had seasons like you where it's like, I'm gonna kind of scale it back, and next thing I know, I'm doubling my season before, and it's not really a choice for us, right? Like, once you get addicted to it, and I purposely don't say hooked, by the way, because it's like the worst pun of fishing ever. Like, your first tournament and you're hooked. Yeah, I try to avoid saying that, but like, the addiction's real. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to cut into that, but that was a very recognizable line there, where it was like, I said I was going to tone it down, and
and it I don't have a big social media presence, but one thing I would say that you can learn a lot and get a lot of information now with social media and YouTube to find out how to do things, how to rig things, and just what other people are doing, and just to jump in on. You know what I mean? It's just there's a lot of information out there that you can take in really quickly.
There is, but it's also, there's a caveat to that. You can watch any sort of informal YouTube video, and they could tell you, like, oh, you got to fish this specific technique like this. These are the baits we like. But none of that information matters until you have time on the water with that technique, that bait, and trying to figure out, that presentation itself. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I totally agree. So Todd, I have a question for you. When you first, so this is actually a really great story that that is not like one that I think that John and I knew before just hearing it from you. So your career, so to speak, not as a fisherman, but as a competitive kayak angler, your career is less than 2 years old. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So like I said, 2000, probably the summer of 21, I picked up my first 10-foot Pelican sit inside kayak. And then it evolved. I think within 6 months, I got a pedal drive, kind of a knockoff Amazon pedal drive, which was okay. You could stand in it, but you could rig it. And I had a fish finder on it and all that stuff. And then when I did the Champlain event last year, another big learning experience for me was I did not pay attention to the weather enough and have a backup plan. And the wind I launched 3 or 4 times that day and I just was lost. And immediately after that, I think a couple weeks after, I went out and got I'm in a bona fide P127. And that took care of my stability issues and rough water stuff. So with an XI3.
Very cool. Yeah, I have a love-hate with that kayak. I've had a few of those, and I've really liked all but one of them, and I'll just kind of leave it at that. But they were, it's a really versatile kayak, and it handles a lot better than I think most people think, which is cool. But so I have a question for you, Todd, because to kind of go back to my one of the things I was thinking about was, when I first started. I remember the first time when I first started fishing tournaments, I remember the first time I saw a Hobie Pro Angler show up to an event and no fish finder, by the way, a couple of us had a few 4-inch Garmin's back then. I think I had I can't remember what it's called now, but, and this guy shows up so anyways, I was intimidated by a pro angler just stripped back then, which compared to now, what was that like? Your first MAKB event? You got your 10-foot sit inside, which I think we've all seen a bunch of people that do that. By the way, I've been beaten by people like that many times. Yeah. So this is not a put down of the sit inside. But when you show up to a tournament, you see some of these rigs that people have. Walk us through what goes through your head on that, because I'm just genuinely curious about that.
The first tournament I did, I was a little bit overwhelmed to see what everybody had and how they were going about it, and then in that tournament, I ended up finishing high enough where I qualified for the championship that year. And that was my second tournament, was the MAKB championship at Quinsigamon. And that had 34, 38 people at that with some real decked out kayaks. And that was really humbling for me to see that. And then obviously it gets you into thinking I need to get a bigger kayak, start loading it up with everything like these guys, just so I can try to hang with them, which you really don't need to do that in most cases, but the Kennebec being one of them, that was a great event for both spectrums of kayak fishing, as far as bare bones and then all the electronics.
Sure. Well, speaking of the Kennebec, walk us through just kind of how you approach this event. I thought it was a really cool, I think the event was really cool in that, I don't feel like there was any sort of advantage one way or another going into it, outside of this season. I feel fairly confident that most, if not all, anglers had not heard of this river in terms of a fishing spot before, right? I think the Kennebec is mostly, we got a lot of questions about Kennebec is whitewater. What are we doing on the Kennebec, right? So I feel fairly confident that most of the people in the event hadn't fished it before. Just walk us through how you approached it, what your thought was, what your thought process was about taking a shot on this event. That was something that we got a lot of messaging about. So I'm just curious to hear how it came to be for you.
So to start the season, I was going to lock in when I heard the schedule. I was going to for sure be going to Sacandaga, Winnipesaukee, and the St. Lawrence. Those were the 3 that I was locking in right away and making arrangements to go to. Then the Kennebec, I was going to leave open because Candlewood, I live about an hour and 40 minutes from Candlewood. So I wanted to, if I needed the Kennebec to qualify, which didn't matter, but that's another discussion. I was going to save the Kennebec if needed. And then my wife tells me in early August, oh, by the way, I booked us for Skowhegan, Maine, where you're going to fish the Kennebec River event. I said, oh, I guess I am going to that one. So she made all the arrangements and she found a spot, and that's how that started.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I got a bone to pick with some people that were at the awards, you know. So when I got up there, did my little speech, and I thanked her, I think she got a more of applause than I did for
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that anyone's going to be on your side after that case you just laid out. I
don't think so.
So we ended up getting up there Wednesday night kind of late, because we have a travel trailer we take. I load the kayak on the top and we pull the trailer. We usually find an RV park as close as we can to the lake or the river. And just so has it, where we were staying was a quarter mile from the Canaan Road launch, I believe it is, just below the dam there. A quarter mile. So that was great. I could, get up and go. So Thursday morning pre-fishing, and the pre-fishing, you can have a long discussion on strategies for that. But I did something a little different than I normally would do. I usually on Thursdays, I try to see as much as I can, cover as much water, fish, try to find a lure or something that they'll hit, and then just try to cover water and see stuff. And then I try to dial it in on Fridays. Like I try to get up there and have 2 full days of pre-fishing if I can. So that's what I did. And during the early afternoon Thursday, I got pretty far down the river, about 3 miles from the launch. And I rolled up on this spot and I sight fished a 15-inch largemouth. Caught another one about the same, really close to there. When I came back through it, I caught a 17-inch smallmouth on a chatterbait, all in a pretty small spot. So I figured that was most likely going to be my first spot, and went back Friday. I headed down that area. I didn't fish it. What I did almost all of Friday was looking for areas that set up the same as that, with the same heavy weeds. And afterwards, I looked at my mapping, and it was always these little backwater inlets that this was at. I think there was a funny little flow happening, and then it also allowed the weeds to get a little heavier outside of those. So that's all I did mostly Friday. I think on Thursday, I did get a couple 17-inch smallmouth, a few 15, 16-inch largemouth. On Friday, I did get one largemouth that was a little over 19 in the same type of spot. So 2 of my 4 main places I never dropped the line in pre-fishing. I just eyeballed them and was going to go on the faith that what I was seeing was going to work out, because I did visually see a lot of fish in those areas. So the tournament came around, and it was 3 miles to my ideal spot, and I knew I couldn't make it in the half hour. So what I did was I just motored as far as I could. And then when lines in came, I had a couple like drive-by or fly-by spots I hit really quick on the way. So, and of course, immediately when I get to my first spot, first cast with the chatterbait, I get a 15. Get down on the board. Next cast, same exact spot, I get another 14.5. So that was good for me, because and maybe a lot of people are like this, I'm a big momentum guy. Like if I can get started early and you're feeling like you're doing the right thing, confidence is big, and you just keep reeling them in, And so that spot, I literally fished there for the first hour and a half, and probably I did little drifts down it, but I really caught all the bass at about a 30-yard stretch, and I caught my first 6 there. And then when I went about 15 minutes without a bite, I was thinking, okay, do I make a move here? Because I had 4 key areas I wanted to hit. And then I just happened to think, like, well, I should move on to my next, but I looked directly across the river, and I saw something I didn't really notice in pre-fishing, that there was another spot that set up identical again, directly across. I said, well, my other spot's across there. I'm going to hit that on my way. Get to that spot, and 3 casts, 3 bass within 8 feet of each other. 15, 15 and 3/4, and 17 and 3/4. And basically my tactic was the same on all my spots. I'd roll up on them, start with the chatterbait to hit the outside edge. And then I would use the cutter worm with a little 1/8 ounce weight, let it hit the holes, get down in there. And then the third lure I was using, I just Texas rigged a Senko, and I would throw it on top of the pads, creep it off the edge, and as soon as it fell into the water, they would hammer it. And I had that set up on 30-pound braid, because I figured that with the thick weeds I was in, they weren't going to be line shot. I didn't worry about that. And then I could really jack them out of there. Because it seemed to me a lot of the fish on that river were really grouped up pretty tight. Like when you found a spot, you found them. And then you'd go some longer stretches of wherever you're fishing and I wouldn't find anything. And all of a sudden, boom, you'd get them again. Another thing about that end of the river that I was at, pre-fishing, I saw one other kayak angler down there. And when I saw him, I knew that was going to be my key spot. And he was on the other side. So I wasn't near there. I immediately shot over to there and kind of just hung out there for a while until he moved his way down. I guess you call that guarding a spot or something, figuring he wouldn't notice it, or maybe it didn't matter. So I would roll up on my spots, throw the chatterbait. Then I was dropping in the cutter worm, and basically I would work my way deep to shallow on each spot and just kind of cover everything. That second spot was a surprise one for me, and it was key. I submitted 3 fish in 6 minutes there, including one of the ones that would be in my 5 fish limit. Then on my way to the next spot, I cracked another 16 3/4. And then I get to the spot where it was my biggest area, and I ended up catching the 19-inch smallmouth. And that was a fish, I'll never forget that. So I was standing up most of the time during the day fishing because it enabled me to really see the vegetation and the holes in it, because I really like to feather through and then make sure it dropped down in the holes. So a lot of the fish, and I knew they were grouped up, was a lot of fish in there because a lot of them would grab it and run. So my hunch was they were trying to get it away from the other fish. And they would your line would just be shooting out, and then you could just crack them. So the smallmouth was pretty close, probably 10 to 15 feet off my kayak when he hit. I set on him, and not that I have to tell you this, but when you're fishing in the deep weeds, every time you set on a fish, it feels like a 5-pounder. Right, because they're caught up in there. This one, it didn't budge when I set, and he actually pulled me back, and I lost a little balance, and I said, oh, this is going to be a good one. Mm-hmm. Then it came screaming out of the weeds, came out of the water like 4 feet, and I knew immediately that was going to be my big fish, and it took me a bit to get it in, but I did. And then, of course, you have the fish in your lap, and I knew I had a really good limit after catching that one. So I look up, take my time, take a breath, put it on the board, and then I see I'm in first. But then, of course, you see who's behind you. You see Jake Angulas, Ray Morales behind you, and you know that you got to keep going right up to the end, because they're always in the hunt, and they're always going to contend to win a tournament. So that was spot 3. End of the day, I make my 4th. Oh, back to the 19-inch smallmouth. I think the next cast I throw in the same hole, I got a 16.5-inch largemouth. Right after that, it was just couldn't get over how congested the fish were, and they were staying in there even when you would start pulling them out. And it got to the point where when I knew I had set on a fish that wasn't going to be a keeper, a 14 or 15, I would just try to rip it out of there as fast as I could to get back in there for another one. I think I had estimated I probably caught my limit, and then another dozen that were in the 14 to 16-inch range. That didn't help me throughout the day. Then get to my last spot, and I end up just getting a 17 and a 17.25-inch smallmouth on the chatterbait to finish the day. But it was just one of them days you'll never forget,
Yeah, it was really cool to watch that, to kind of keep an eye on it and see you just kind of scratch and claw your upgrades throughout the day. I have a question though, Todd, for you, and one thing that I feel like we were kind of pushing as a staff, John, Ken, and I, when it came to like, listen, guys, early when we announced the event on the Kennebec, we kept saying, like, we can't tell you this enough. Like, we went and spent 3 hours at this place, and we were catching. It sounded very similar to your experience in a way that like we were catching smallmouth in weeds, heavy weeds. Doesn't make any sense. We couldn't say everything we were doing. We didn't want to give things away, but like. We have heard from somebody, I can't remember who it was, told us at the awards they caught a smallmouth on a frog.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think is pretty clear to me, but I'm curious if your experience was the same as well, is that these fish clearly are not the pressured tournament fish that we're used to, at least to me. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it didn't seem that way because they were, like I said, they would stay grouped together. They didn't get spooked very easy. Like there was a number of fish I would just drift over with my kayak and they would kind of just sit there and look at them.
Yeah, I guess. And you mentioned a Senko, which is kind of like to some tournament anglers, like the thought of a Senko is just like
whatever it takes.
Well, I agree with that statement completely. Like if you're competing and like you get to a point where it's like, oh, I heard they're hitting a Senko, I'm out. Like, what are you doing? No, but you got to compete. But like I feel like this just to hear that in this place, like I don't think it's like a jab to I'm not saying it was easier to fish, but I think it's great to have these tournaments where you have a pattern, but it's 3 different baits, right? Mm-hmm. Which is like, at least for me, not what you traditionally think of as a pattern, right? But it's still something that as you went down the river, you were figuring it out. I thought it was really cool to hear about the starting deep and going shallow. I think it's a great observation, and I think it's really telling, but also, the mindset I feel like I talk about this all the time. I probably do. The mindset of tournaments, I feel like, is the most underestimated part of tournament fishing that doesn't get spoken about. And that's like the decision that you were making, that you were talking about. Like, I got to run 3 miles. My spot's 3 miles away. I don't have the time to do that. And so you start fishing along the way, and then you start recognizing similarities. Walk us through your decision making there in terms of do you have that mental tug of war of like, all right, I just need to get where I'm supposed to be, and I'm not there yet?
Yeah, when you get out there and it's lines in, I have this freaking notion I have to have a line in, right? I got to start fishing. My best thing would have been to take that extra 20 minutes, a half hour, get to that spot, which was my best spot, quality spot, which I did a lot of my damage early on. But you can't help yourself but just start fishing when it's time to fish. That's another. And of course, leaving the first spot, I was like, am I making a mistake? Are they just going to reload in here all day? And I could sit on one spot, being a no scoper, that's some of these things I got to think about and where I'm going and what I'm trying to do. But that river, I think that river, you could have caught him any way you wanted to there,
Yeah, it certainly seems like it. We've heard, from the people we spoke to, it seems like everyone was on like kind of a similar in terms of like the overall approach, but different baits all around. Like we heard a really wide variety of baits, which is one of the things that I thought was really cool about this event. And one of the things that I should have stated already, congrats on breaking Jake Angelos' streak of almost sweeping our season. And that's not I'm not rooting against Jake whatsoever. I think what he's done this season has been really impressive. What he's done since joining EKF has been really, really impressive. And even before then, like Jake is just one of those guys, a student of the game, and it's great. But I'd be lying if I said there weren't talks like, is Jake just going to win this season? And, like it was really cool to see you, Todd, going to battle with Jake. And, one of the things I noticed that you've mentioned in sharing your experience tournament day is just like, I feel like a lot of times we enter these tournaments, we start logging our fish, right? We don't have a limit that's worth writing home about. And some folks get kind of bummed out about that. And John could probably tell you this more than me, but like as 2 guys who've also had the experience of winning an EKF event and other tournaments, but it's kind of a curse when you're doing well and there's time left. Because right? Like you have the ability to go on the app and see like, oh, Jake's upgrading, or whoever's like chasing your tail. Walk us through that mentality. I feel like we don't hear that a lot of it's already tough enough to make decisions on tournament day. What do you do when you see Jake Angelos 1 position behind you and gradually upgrading?
Yeah, when you're catching 17, 18, 19 inch fish, they're going to be catching them. So you just got to keep yourself plugging away right till the last minute. Because my last call came at 5 minutes before the end of the tournament. So you just got to keep 1 more fish. I need another half inch. I did kind of feel, and maybe this wasn't the right thought, was in that last hour, that if it, the 91 inches should have been enough. And as far as Jake, Angulas and those guys, how they're so successful, I think that you should use that as a driving force for everybody else to say, if he's going to go out there and compete, I mean, every time he's in a tournament, he's going to compete for the win. That's just the reality of how great he is. And there's Ray's the same way, and there's a number of other people that fish EKF that are like that. Anytime they're in a tournament, they're going to contend to win it. And everybody should strive, to be like that and to try to compete as hard as they can, because I've had some real bummer tournaments, and it's like the consistency is my next thing, is to try to continue, having high finishes and just putting up solid limits, any way you can, because there's a lot of tournaments you go out start and things don't go your way. And that, I think, is where, and I think Jake spoke to this a little bit on the St. Lawrence River. He wasn't able to get him to bite when he was trying to scope him, and he went shallow and got him with a chatterbait. Versatility, I mean, that's, putting something together when you don't have it that day and be able to come up with a solid limit, finding a way to do that. And, and when I say I'm a no-scoper, don't take that as a negative, because at some point next year I'm probably going to have it.
That's where we've all started. Yeah. It's
just right now, that's the way I am.
But I'll tell you though, that's really great, because, one of the things, this is one of the things that was tough for us going into this season is, the off season of the 2023-2024 season, we heard a lot of feedback from folks about things like, these scopers are going to win every event. We got a lot of feedback about that. And we're not, one of the things that's really tough for us as we're running EKF is, we don't want anyone to feel like, we want to provide an experience, right? We ideally don't want anyone to leave a tournament unhappy. But the tough part is like some tournaments just don't go your way. And it can be tough to kind of take that in, think about that, reflect on it, right, and not project it out into something else. And I think a lot of some of the feedback we've gotten about, in particular about forward-facing sonar, has been like, kind of viewed it as like this cheat code, right? You get it and you're good. And it's just not that simple. As somebody who's adopted it this year, my first year with it, it's definitely not the case, right? Like, you're not instantly good. It honestly adds a lot to the mental game of like, do I stop scoping and go fish what I know? Or do I stick to the scope and all that? But it's been a really, this season in our schedule was really intended to to present a challenge for people who have strengths of all different kinds, whether that be scoping, whether that be go shallow. And one of the things that I think inadvertently did was just kind of expose how deep some people's plans are, some people's pre-fishing and strategizing beforehand. But then I think the other part of this last event, the Kennebec, goes to show like you can take these guys that you can compete with guys who have been fishing forever that have had a tremendous amount of success. And on any given day, you can have a better day of fishing than they do, and that to me, I think has been really cool. As we were getting ready for this podcast, I saw, Todd, that you fished with us all last season. I was trying to get a feel for how long you had been competing in tournaments. And the other odd part is, those of us who have been around way too long in the game, we've been around since Tourney X. So you got to kind of follow Fishing Chaos, make the jump to Tourney X and see where people are at. And then I saw like, wait a minute, Todd's only been fishing like 2 years. And I saw like all the events from last year, which we very much appreciate. But kind of walk us through that, feel like how it's been since like just starting to getting a pretty solid, pretty damn good win in less than 2 years.
Yeah, it really was. I like it because I get to travel around and you see different fisheries and how, I mean, to be honest with you, last year, if I had finished in the top 20 at any event, I was going to be happy. That was just the reality for me, because I knew I was throwing myself into the wolves. But I said, I just want to see how it shakes out and learn as much as I can, as fast as I can. And really, and my biggest learning is just basically watching of the top anglers, how they kind of approach it and how they actually fish. And I took that this year, and I've had quite a bit more success this year at MAKB and now on EKF. And also I keep in the back of my mind that I'm doing this because it's fun and I enjoy it. So I've always got to take the good with the bad, and even learn on those bad days, have a fun time trying to cob something together and just, wow, I never thought that would have worked. And I got a 5-fish limit because I zigged when I thought I was going to zag, and that's, to me, it's all about the challenge against the other anglers, but also on the fishery and yourself and doing something you're not comfortable with, maybe to catch fish. Like, here's a great example. The sock and daga, you're going to laugh, but that's the first time I've ever used a jerk bait consistently. I've played around with it in the past, but pre-fishing there, I caught one on a square bill, and then I started throwing the jerk bait, and it was pretty steady catching them nonstop. And that was another fun, great event, to catch, 14 to 16 inch smallmouth all day long on a jerk bait was pretty fun. And I would tell you a quick little story on that one. I had a specific jerk bait they were hitting pre-fishing pretty good. I was using another one. They weren't hitting it as good. And then the Friday afternoon pre-fishing, I had the jerk bait. I was like,
you could tell us. You could tell us what it is.
Oh, it was a Stunna, the Morning Dawn or something color like that. The purple translucent one, a great jerk bait. So I knew Friday, I said I should put this away because a pike's going to grab it and I'm going to lose it. No, I got to catch one more smallmouth with it, right? Of course, I get like a 30-inch pike on it and I'm freaking out and I grab the net and I get it. So I said, all right, that thing's done for the day. Tournament morning comes, first cast, I catch a smallmouth on it, the jerk bait. Couple casts later, I get another one on, it breaks me off with that jerk bait, like the second fish on that tournament bait. And it gets better. The smallmouth starts jumping out of the water trying to shake the jerk bait. Like 5 or 6 times all around me. I've got my net trying to chase this fish around to get my jerk bait back. Never got it, but I did okay in that event. I was pretty pleased how I finished there, but I'm sure everybody's got tons of stories like that.
That's another event though that I feel like people slept on. Like the fishing there, like the amount of fish that were put up was pretty crazy. Like it was pretty insane for just the sheer numbers. I don't know that there's many people that didn't have a good time there from a fishing perspective. And one of the things we talk about a lot is, we as tournament anglers and as fishermen first, we always want to catch the trophy fish. We always want to catch those big, heavy fish. But then there's also just those days that's like steady catching the fish, 14s, 15s, especially smallmouth. Like so many times, it's been so many fish I've caught that are 15 inches that fight harder than the 19s, that fight harder than the 20s that I've been lucky enough to catch. And it's like, it's fun day. I feel like oftentimes I feel like with tournaments we kind of miss that fact. That's like we like fishing first. That's why the tournaments are awesome and the competitiveness of it, while also like having the camaraderie is amazing. But like we've heard a lot this year, like about these places, like we've never fished there, or those places fish like crap. And we're kind of like, the three of us, John, Ken, and I, are like, we've always been the anglers. It's like, just tell us where we're going. Like we don't care. They doesn't have to meet a standard for us to go. Like just tell us where we're going and we're going to be there, type of thing. And it's been really odd this year to kind of see people kind of be like, those fish aren't quality enough for me to justify going there. But then like there's been so many like pleasant surprises of this season, and I think Kennebec has been one of them. So I'm curious what motivates you to fish tournaments. Is it the trophy fish, or is it just the ability to put consistent patterns together? Is it just fishing these places that you wouldn't otherwise? Like what is it that motivates you?
That's part of it is getting to different places and going around. And to be honest, my wife and I use these as little mini vacations. I take a couple of days and we take the RV and we go out and we fish a tournament and we have a blast. But it's also, like you said, being around like-minded people that enjoy the same thing that you do enough to get up at 3:00 in the morning to get ready and go to a boat launch and float in a plastic boat when it's dark out to get to your spot. Like that's a big part of it for me. Like, wow, these people enjoy it just as much or maybe more than I do. It's fun in that regard, And then of course the competitive aspect, you get older. I'm 47 and like I can't go well, I could, but can't go play hockey and baseball like I used to. But I can sit or stand in my kayak and catch bass all day. That's a good way to compete on, for myself.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, I think I agree with all of those points. Like, it's I don't know, it's cool to hear somebody thinking like similar lines, but also, it's also, we talk about people being crazy enough to get up at 3 a.m. I think part of like one of the things that was good for me early on was seeing like I'm not crazy, or I'm not the only crazy one. I don't know. We might be crazy still, but we're not the only ones, right? Like we're in good company, and that's always been some of my favorites. And like it's still to this day. I was on vacation last week in North Carolina, and I'm the driver who made our way up, and my wife still doesn't understand how I'm able to drive through the night, and like why I like leaving the house like crazy early for these drives. And it's like, I don't know. I don't really know why I like it, but it's like I don't know. It's something that like I've learned to like through fishing. And it's like the motivation to go fishing is enough, but it's also like, I don't know. Sometimes it feels like, why am I the only one who likes this? But then wherever we're going, we don't see anybody until we show up at the ramp and there's 25 of us there, just crazy people. But, I don't know. It's cool. It's great that you mentioned that. And I'm fairly sure that your wife may have like a ton of fans after this, just kind of looking at the chat from early on. So, if she wants to start, was it Justin Rednauer asked if your wife gives lessons? Yeah, does Todd's wife give lessons? Was the one that was up there, and I think that's hilarious. So, kudos to her. I think she gets an assist on this win. I think that's why she got such the reaction from the folks at the awards. So good on her for that one. One of the things that's kind of funny is like we're talking about this tournament, but then we have another one coming up this week, and I see that you're registered already, Todd, going into the championship. So why don't you tell us? Don't give anything away by any means, but let's hear how you're feeling about the championship coming up, and if you have any sort of parts of your plan or approach that you want to share with us going into it.
I think I'm going to struggle. I was there this weekend, and it's not currently a lake that sets up well for me, if I can say that. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully it was just off this past weekend and it improves for me. But it's a beautiful lake, right? And I know it's loaded with big smallies and largemouth and everything. But I've got some work to do to compete, I think, this weekend for me.
You never know, Todd. I mean, we do have some cool nights and cool mornings, and we just had a bunch of cool rain that rolled through.
Yeah.
That lake could flip, and those fish could be dirt shallow, and then it could be anybody's game at that point in time.
Yeah. We'll see how the weather shakes out, and like I said, it's a great lake, and it's the first time I was ever there was this past weekend. And yeah, I saw some fish, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I've actually never been there, never fished there.
And I saw a lot of carp.
Oh.
A couple times they spooked me, scared me. I look, all of a sudden, boom, you see 3 or 4 big carp go by you.
Oh, the big ones. That reminds me of Oneida. Oneida had some massive carp, and it was like every 2 seconds I was jumping out of my seat almost. Yeah, I don't know. It's something. I've never been to Candlewood. I've never fished it, so I'm curious to see how it goes, and a little jealous of folks that get to fish it, but looking forward to seeing how it goes. And I'm hoping that to John's point, some of the weather we've had may really help set up a crazy fall feeding bite for this upcoming weekend. I don't know, but the other element though, Todd, is it's a 2-day event, so it's like you may not win it on the first day, but you also may not lose it. And it's one of those things like if the bite is stingy or if it does get tricky, having the durability of a bite or a pattern can be challenging.
Yeah, I have a plan. I think that I need to work hard to make it work.
Yeah.
For what I'm planning on doing.
If you need any tips or questions about a 2-day pattern, the defending champion happens to be on this call.
That's right.
Which I feel like John has been the most understated champion. I don't mean that as an insult to him. I mean that he joined the staff and we're always like, okay, John won, let's keep going. But John put together a really amazing and impressive performance on Lake George, and As somebody who was out of it after the first day, I did enjoy watching that second day of scrambling. And so I think it's a good, like some of the previous championships we've had, there's a lot of lessons to learn about like the adjustments that you make that are critical. Some of those decisions that are like, am I leaving fish to find fish? Should I have stayed there, that where it showed out, or should I be going to my spot? Yeah. So, to come tournament day, it's those decisions that could change everything for you. Even if you've had a rough pre-fishing, and haven't caught any fish, it can turn.
I thought John said he chased around the same school for 2 days.
Oh, dude, not the second day. I was all over the lake the second day. I had plans A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and it took me to E, F, and G to catch fish. But this whole interview, this whole podcast, it's cool. It's a culmination of, I'm listening to you, Todd, talking about, where you came from. Not too long ago, you're beating the bank, you saw a guy in a kayak, then you got a kayak, right? And it all adds up to different things. And from what I'm picking up, it's time on the water and your mindset. Those two things have led to all of your success. Now, fishing MAKB, you've done pretty well this year. I've seen your name high up on the leaderboard all year, and it all has to do with time on the water and mental state. You have momentum, you're rolling with it, but you're also practicing hard. You're putting together stuff. You're actually in and putting the time and keeping a positive mental attitude with that, because you got Jake Anglis and you got Ray, you got everybody, all these big sticks, right? But you're just like, hey, I give it my all, and I could probably beat them. And this time coming around, it did. So it's cool to listen to your beginnings to now, and just how you're practicing consistently. You're getting better and better as time goes on. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing your success, because, I literally know where it came from now that you gave us that information. So it's a cool story. And it's another similar to Qua, right? Qua's only been in a kayak for a short period of time, but he's all in. He's, putting in the time and the practice, and it's time of water, and then it's mental state. It's really cool to see completely different people,
He's sleeping in his truck to pre-fish. He has a little bed in the back of his truck. That's how dedicated he is. At least I got paper. But I will tell you this little tidbit for me this summer it's going to sound weird, but my favorite event was when I was able to go out to Mashpee, and you looked at the list of the 30 anglers there, the who's who of MAKB fished it, and I ended up running into some good fish and winning that tournament. That one was really special for me. Because I knew all the hammers that were there, and I don't even know why I decided to fish that tournament. I mean, I like that lake. We fished it last year for the champions, and I'm going to shoot out, the 2.5 hour drive to get out there, and things just came together for me. I knew the way the weather was setting up that day that I would have a puncher's chance the way I wanted to fish, and if I can make those 1,000 casts with a chatterbait in the day, I might be able to run into 5 good enough fish, and that worked out for me.
That's all it takes, man. Yeah.
That's really cool. One of the we hear so many times from folks, like a lot of anglers that have been after this, varying amounts of time, some longer, some shorter, and they've just kind of, I don't know, they've just sort of accepted, like, I'm not going to beat Jake, I'm not going to beat Nick Audi, I'm not going to beat Ryan Metalevich, the guys who've had a lot of success in EKF in the past. And I think some folks see EKF as like a, obviously they can compete, everyone's welcome, but as like something that they're not necessarily prepared for or ready for. And I'm just curious what advice you would give to folks who are maybe on the fence about competing in EKF. Maybe they think, that's, I got to go against Jake Angelos, I got to go against Nick Audi, Ryan Metalevich, these guys that are just hammers that seem to catch them no matter what. Like, just what advice you'd give to people that are like, kicking the tires on it?
I would say you got to look at it a couple different ways, and everybody's got individual goals or things they want out of it. And a lot of people's goals probably aren't necessarily to be in the top 5 at every tournament. They want to go have a good time, fish a new place, and do as good as they personally can. And that's what my goals weren't necessarily to beat other people. I know what I did last year. Let's see if I can improve on what I did last year and maybe win a tournament or 2 this year, which I did, or just higher finishes. And a good way to rate yourself is is, the Angler of the Year points. So I keep track of how you're doing throughout the season. Am I doing better than I did the previous year? And that's really all you can do. You really can't look, I think, at some of these. I mean, you're talking, you got some of the best kayak anglers in the country around, here that you're going up against. So to jump in there and after being in a kayak in a year, 2, 3 years, to think you're really going to compete with those guys is pretty tough. But you just got to, for me, I threw myself in there knowing that I was going to struggle, but that struggle is now paying off, I think, for me a little bit, where I'm starting to learn how to get through a day and put up, a limit. And really, last year was mostly just to get out there and to see new fishermen. And this year, I am putting a little bit more time in really trying to get myself to finish higher. I did have a few stinker events this year, but that's going to happen. But I would say, everybody's different. Maybe a lot of people wouldn't want to throw themselves into it like I did. They want to gradually maybe fish 1 or 2 events a year, see how it goes, and then next year they maybe will fish 3 or 4 events. Then that's everybody's. But I would say try at least 1 or 2 events. At least get it out there, and you can see the professionalism of the club and all the other anglers that are out there, and the experience you have. It's pretty solid.
Yeah, I think that's great. And one of the things I tell people who are like contemplating, they've been kayak fishing for a while, that maybe they're starting to consider a tournament, and or not. They're just obviously there's a little bit of like I don't want to say insecurity, but there's like you're a good fisherman, and I think some people think it's going to be like super competitive, and it's not that it isn't competitive, but it's not necessarily one of those. It's a sport that's not like basketball, right? Where we're like defending each other. We're just trying to go out and see who has the best day of fishing, which I think, for most cases anyways, it takes like the edge off of like, yeah, we're competitors against each other, but not really. Like we still hope each other has a good day. I feel like there's still some camaraderie there. One of the things that I think I'm most proud of when it comes to EKF is I feel like we have a good balance of competitiveness with the camaraderie that is, to me, is so great in the sport. Like, I wouldn't be on this podcast if it wasn't for fishing. I wouldn't know John. I wouldn't know Ken. I wouldn't be talking to you, Todd. I wouldn't be, anything having to do with EKF if it wasn't for fishing. And, it has to be, to me, I've always told people it has to be fun first. Like it has to be fun before anything else. Because if a day of fishing doesn't sound fun to you, if like getting up at 3 a.m. to go fish this river that you didn't even know had bass in it before this week, if that doesn't excite you and kind of like make you like, all right, you got my attention, then like maybe tournaments aren't for you, right? Like because that has to be fun first. That has to grab your interest before anything else. Because if you look at the odds of winning, like I think you might win Powerball first, right? Like when it comes to it, like the numbers might line up better for so many other things, right? So like that's the piece that I think this gets lost the most in when it comes to fishing tournaments is like it's so easy to forget. Like fishing is freaking fun before anything else. Like I'm gonna go do that today. If I have like one of those days I never forget, excellent. But if I have one of those days I'd like to forget, that's excellent too. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like that gets lost more than anything. And as somebody, and John, feel free to agree or disagree, but as somebody who this year sat out the EKF schedule, I'll never take that for granted again. I'll tell you that, because this year has been very tough to see these places and be like, good luck, guys. That's been really tough.
Yeah, not only has it been tough watching everybody fish, I feel like what I was talking before, my time on the water part was missing. And then I felt out of the loop when it came to even fishing the local stuff. Like I was just like off. Like everything was just slightly off because I hadn't been fishing every weekend, EKF practicing. Yeah, being in tune with Mother Nature, knowing what's going on. Like it was just everything was slightly off. So I cannot wait and have my time on the water. And then once that's there, the mental state, we'll be strong and we'll be back at it. Yeah.
You just got to you got to learn from every, like like the bomb of a tournament I had at Winnipesaukee. Like people must look at me and say, how can that guy go fish for a whole day and catch one keeper bass? Like on Winnipesaukee, but when I had located, same thing, 3 or 4 good spots. And when I went out to my first spot, there was a couple guys in a bass boat right on top of it, scoping it. And I'm watching them, and it's about 10 minutes before line's in, and they're on it. And all of a sudden, they don't even throw a line in the water. They go about 100 yards further offshore, and they start cracking them right in front of me. And I go to my spot, which they already went over, and I'm looking, talk about the mental spiral I did that day. I think I put 20 miles on my kayak to go. I have nowhere. I just would go and throw a Ned rig there. Oh, no bites. Okay, I'm going to go, half a mile down there. Maybe there'll be one fish over there I can catch. But it was just, that was the biggest low for me this year, was that, because I actually did have pretty high hopes for that as far as putting up a solid limit. I knew I wasn't going to contend, but I had caught 83 or 84 inches the day before, and I thought it was going to be easy, and it wasn't. So, and that's another thing, pre-fishing strategies that I changed was I said, I'm going to try to catch as few fish as I can, if that makes sense, pre-fishing, but still have an idea what they're going to eat and roughly where they are. And like I said, there was 2 of my spots that I got keepers on at the Kennebec that I never threw a line in pre-fishing. I just had the faith that they were going to be there.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that happens tournament day. I can't explain it. And it's not every tournament day, but like, oh, maybe it is. I feel like every tournament day somehow, it's probably more us than anything, but it feels like the fish know for some reason. Like today's higher stakes than, yesterday when I caught you off of here or whatever. And, the tournament that I won, I had the worst pre-fishing of any tournament I've ever had ever. And that was the tournament I learned that like, pre-fishing is not about catching. It's also can be about eliminating and knowing like having an experience is like, I'm never coming back to this spot. Like you can't pay me. So I'm done. Like that's valuable too, right? Like even a bad pre-fishing has value, right? It's still, you still know way more than you did before, like even something like, okay, I've been looking at this place on Google Maps for the past 3 months. And now I'm like, I'm actually seeing it in person. And realizing like, oh yeah, Google Maps, it has a picture taken at a very specific time of year. It's not always obvious when that is. And vegetation is all of a sudden here and it wasn't on the map, and all of those things that like, you're really just, people talk about studying maps and stuff a lot. And I think it's a super important thing to do. But without actually seeing it, like you never really know. So like any pre-fishing is valuable. It's just tough to remember that, like it's tough to feel that confidence. I don't know that you ever feel confidence from eliminating water and having nothing else, but it's still without realizing it is way more than you knew going into it. So do you think that was a long ramp up to this question, Todd, my apologies. But do you think like your dedication to pre-fishing this year has been the reason for the improvement, or do you think it's a mindset thing? What do you think attributes to that?
I think my pre-fishing strategy has evolved to not just blindly going out and trying to catch fish pre-fishing and doing that, was more to be more dialed in and more specific. And this year I was able to do for all the events the 2 full days of pre-fishing. So I was really Thursdays focusing on what they will eat and roughly a pattern or something I could find. And then the Friday was always dialing it in more, defining it a little bit better and locking in locations.
Sure.
So I think that's what's happened. Like pre-fishing in the past, I would just go out on a lake and buzz the whole bank and, I caught a bass over there. I'll go catch one on tournament day. Well, you caught the bass that was over there, dummy.
The amount of times I've like wanted to beat myself up tournament day because I didn't come up with a plan B or plan C.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I feel like depth of a plan is the ideal in fishing, right? Like it's so many times. I mean, there's countless stories of like of people that I've stayed in the house with or whatever that are like, oh, I hammered them, like it's on, and then tournament day, it's like you're looking for them on the leaderboard and it's like, what happened? And it turns out their plan, very much like mine, was held together with glue and popsicle sticks. Like there wasn't a lot to it. And something like, your mention of the Champlain event, I think was a great example of that, where I had a great pre-fishing, like a really great day. Got some cool clips of me catching great fish, got the fish docks, like my favorite pattern. And then, tournament day on Champlain, and that wind is just hammering these spots that 2 days ago were calm, flat. Even with a motor, I wasn't having to use it much. Those days that are always the most fun. And then it's like, okay, that wind is just going to ruin that for you.
Yeah, that event,
Plan B. Yeah,
the Thursday and Friday there was beautiful weather, and I remember the Friday getting off the water at about 11 o'clock in the morning, because I caught them whenever I wanted to catch them, and I probably saw 150 fish where I was fishing. So I knew, to me, my mindset was, I have no reason to be on the water anymore. I'm going to go have lunch and hang out, have a few beers. What I should have been doing was looking at the weather and finding more protected areas in that 3 or 4 hours I had.
That's not as fun as beer, though.
Talk about a learning experience, But I really believe that every time you're on the water, good and bad, you should be able to learn something.
Oh yeah,
take something 100%. Away from it, which is how you got to look at it. Enjoy yourself and take something away, as much as you can, after each day you're on the water.
Yeah, I think that might be one of the best pieces of advice I've heard this entire podcast, and there's been some great stuff shared. But I think that's exactly it. Is like, I feel like we see a lot of people that join the sport and then fizzle out really quickly because they think they're going to join it. They've watched a YouTube video or two, and they think like they've got what the people on the video are doing dialed in, and then that first event, as we've all experienced, doesn't go the way we hoped or dreamed, or even anywhere close to it. And then there's sort of like and that's it, right? Like I didn't win, I'm out, which is honestly, like this is the fishing tournaments, I feel like, is a war of attrition. Like you need to hang in there, like just, and eventually it's going to go your way. Like that's the game. To me, that's like, one of these days, but I don't blame anyone else for it, right? Like it's not necessarily mine to lose. Like it's something that people, that, you compete and you're hoping your day is better. But far too often we get these like, we've had a couple folks this season where we've had to engage in like really, really long chats, like even after the tournament, like, cause these people feel like they were cheated in some way, or like, I don't know, like something was like the tournament that they were supposed to win was taken away from them, which is like just the backwards attitude, right? Like I keep joking. We were joking at what tournament were we at, John? I might have been St. Lawrence. We went to the casino. We're talking about the odds, like how bad the odds were, and then we started thinking like how bad the odds are in fishing tournaments. Yeah, and we're like, holy crap, we've been gambling all of these years, it turns out. And that's really like what it is, right? Like it's gambling in terms of the tournament entry fees and like where you end up. It's gambling, but like it's competitive. Like, the competitive fishing aspect is the part that we're interested in. But like, I don't think people quite view it that way. So they think like they strike out once or twice, then it's never going to happen, and they kind of give up, or they think like EKF is something that maybe they're never going to compete in or whatever. And really it's like, no, it's not EKF. It's not other anglers. To me, it's like the person that you're talking to. It's their mindset, right? Like they're not like, you gotta take your L's. You gotta take your licks before, usually. Not everybody. I think Qua's ruining that for us. And maybe even you, Todd, a little bit too, where it's like, a year and a half and you're doing it. But still, like you have to have those experiences. And it sounds like you've had them in really short time, which is great. And that's what I always tell people. Like when we go to the expo and we have people that are like, what do I got to do to join EKF? And then they're like, tell us about it. And it's like, it sounds like, obviously we're biased because we run EKF, but we always try to tell people, like, if you're interested in EKF, do it. Like if you're interested in, in MAKB, do it. Like just go into it. Your first tournament, don't have any expectations. Like just take it all in, learn from it, see if it's something you like. Don't go into it with like I'm going to win. Maybe you do. And if you do, that's just an awesome bonus, right? Like I'm not saying you're not going to win, but don't go into your first event or even starting fishing tournaments with that goal. Like just go into it trying to learn, and then everything else is a plus, right? And that mindset, establishing that early on, I feel like is so critical. I feel like it's such an important piece. And I just feel like it just gets, I don't know, maybe YouTube is part of it. I don't know. Like these YouTubers that just seem to, the Greg Blanchards that we've been following forever that just go out and make a day out of nothing. Right. Like, and it seems like it's so easy for him, but then we forget like this dude is putting out 2 to 3 videos a week, which means he's fishing that often every week, full-time job almost. And then you start realizing like, oh crap, this is like, it's not being handed to him. I'm only watching selected clips of hours upon hours of struggle,
right.
Or being on the water anyways in general. So I don't know. I just think that's
I think for me, the last couple, throwing myself into it as much as I have really has helped me really shorten that learning curve by just doing so many events and being around it so much,
100%.
And there's obviously the skill level of the anglers, which is the biggest part of it, I think. But there's definitely that luck involved. Like on the Kennebec for me, every single fish I set the hook on Saturday, I landed. I didn't lose a single fish that I sat on. And I'm talking, it was probably 30 bass. So there was that luck where I didn't break off or it didn't just come free. You caught the 19, the 18s, and it was just, there's that luck, I think. But, and then the skill of putting yourself in the right spot, at the right time. And there's some luck there too. But, it's worth for anybody to get out there. What do you lose by, giving it a shot other than the entry fee and maybe, money you have for accommodations and however to get the event. And then at least you'll know. You've done the experience, and it was for me. I enjoyed. I'll do it again, or what? Maybe competitive fishing isn't for me, and then you go that route. But
and that does happen. But I think you summed it up perfectly in that like it accelerates that learning curve. You're seeing even like your first event. If nothing else, the first thing you're noticing is how people are setting up their kayaks. Right, like you're learning little things right off the bat before you even hit the water. And then you're seeing folks on the water, and then you're seeing folks after the event and how they're handling themselves, how they're conducting themselves. Like, are they still friendly even though they had a bad day? Like you're seeing all these things that like that the videos I feel like often don't show. And that's one of the things that I think has been so fascinating about this entire podcast for me is it's just been kind of thinking back to when I first started fishing out of a kayak, which is the kayak you described, Todd, is very similar to what I started fishing out of, just a 9.5 foot Dick's Sporting Goods kayak.
Yeah,
the idea of putting a rod holder on a kayak back then was like, you're crazy. But but then like as it's evolved, like you see people doing things, you're like, well, that's interesting. Like it's not like you're copying them, you're not taking a spot, but you're like, that's fascinating. I never thought to do it that way before, and and just the way that we rig and approach things, but then. Things like these podcasts and these interviews expose people to ideas they hadn't thought of in terms of map study, right? Like, the idea that people are constantly studying Google Earth and Google Maps on these lakes to see what's what, navionics. I have a whole folder on my phone dedicated to like fishing apps, and there's a bunch in there. And that sort of aspect to it that some folks don't consider is like the amount of work that goes into it, even off the water, which I think is really cool. But it's been really cool to hear that, Todd, and really impressive to see just how fast you've taken to the sport and found success. And I hope other people that are maybe watching this or kicking the tires on EKF see that. I think there's a lot of assumptions made about the accessibility of EKF in terms of accessibility to success, but also like we have a group of folks that have had a lot of success in EKF, but then we've had tournaments like this where it's like, people come out of nowhere and win this thing. It's just their day. And I think that's really great. And, congrats again, Todd. That's really, this has been a really cool interview. And I just think just adds a ton of compliments to your performance on the Kennebec. I think it's really great.
Thank you. Thanks to you guys for a great trail.
Appreciate that. It's been
our pleasure.
It's been a year, that's for sure. But I'm really happy to, it's been a good one for you. And I don't know. I thought the awards. I thought something about the Kennebec felt, really, really nice. I don't know how else to explain it. Like we didn't have the best turnout in terms of anglers signed up, but in terms of percentage of people who attended the awards, I think it was the highest we've maybe the highest you've ever had. But there's like all but maybe 2 people there, which I thought was just awesome. I thought the environment of it was really great, and I don't know, I just really appreciated it, and I thought it was good, and I thought it was great to have that opportunity to give you that trophy and that check, and made the mistake of offering to hold that trophy for you, which again I should apologize for. Not trying to take it, just but it was great, and it was cool. I don't know how many people there. I'm sure you've met a ton of people at that awards, if nothing else, Todd.
Yeah. Some people I've known, and you meet some new people every time you go out there, and that's another great thing about it. You're meeting new people with different experiences from different parts, of the Northeast, and to see how they do things. It's really interesting in that regard.
Yeah, it's really cool, and I think the culture of EKF overall provides a situation where you're around people from all over the Northeast, and you learn something from them, right? Like everybody has different experiences. People who fish, people who are from New York, versus people like myself who are from New Hampshire. Like these states that seem really close on a map fish entirely differently, right? Like we have areas, there's some areas in New York that are not like anything else in all of the Northeast, and that's really cool. And to meet and interact with these people who've grown up fishing these spots, that's just really cool to hear their experiences. And sometimes that means being able to, hearing people talk about the great day they had at the same day that we've had the worst day of fishing, but we learn from that. And I think the way you've talked about learning things just throughout this experience is, I think, exactly right. I think it's the totally right mindset. And honestly, it's probably been played a huge part in leading to your first win in EKF. I think that's just awesome.
Yeah. Just looking at, the weird way I look at it is like, well, these guys can put up 85, 90 inches. Why can't I do it? And it's just a matter of time on the water, like you say, and figuring things out. And then, boom, there's the day you do it, And wow, now does that open the door a little bit more, give me that much more confidence that I actually can, compete, in certain situations, with some of these guys. And that's the way I see it. Every time, like I said, every time you're on the water, you've got to learn something from it,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really well said. That's probably a good way to wrap this up. What do you think, John? Do you have any other questions for Todd?
Not so much questions for Todd, but I do have a little PSA. I guess you can't really call it a PSA. Anyways, I'd just like to talk about an incident that I had a couple weeks ago, just to remind people on how to be safe. So about a little over a week ago, practicing for the MAKB championship, it was like 3:00 on Friday. I had just putting away my stuff to wrap up practice for it. Literally putting away my rod to go back to the launch. I was putting a rod away in my last rod holder all the way in the back of my boat. When I finished, I stepped back and I stepped on my seat or stepped on something. I lost my balance. And what happened was my next foot went directly to the gunnel, and I put all my weight on my gunnel and immediately flipped back. It's embarrassing. Well, I'm embarrassed of it because I've been standing on my kayak, this same kayak, for 3 years now. But, it happens. Lost my balance, flipped my kayak. Now, there were a couple things that happened. My PFD is inflatable, went off within 5 seconds. Works great. I had it tight. I was floating. I was wearing overalls, so bibs. There, I felt them weighing me down. Wear your PFDs, please, for the love of God, because it would have been extremely hard. Swim and float and did what I had to do. Second is strap down your black packs, whether it's a battery box or whatever. I have always just thrown my black packs into my kayak without even thinking about it. Well, fortunately, my black pack that has all my baits floats. The one with batteries does not float. For me, fortunately, my connector that I have from my boat to my battery, the wire, the plug, stayed in my plugged in and was able to hold my battery box to my kayak. The downside of that is because it wasn't strapped down, it sunk, and it was basically an anchor, and I wasn't able to flip over my kayak on the water, and it made it really hard to get my boat to shore in order to flip it over. My trolling motor battery got water in it, crapped the bed. My graph batteries worked fine. All my electronics worked great. I did lose 9 rods. As well as strapping down your kayak, seriously strap down your rods. I lost 9 of my best rods, and I'm pretty upset about it. Fortunately, I was safe. At no point in time was the water was warm enough, so I didn't struggle or anything. But strap down your rods, strap down if you can, because if you do flip, it happens way too fast. I lost 9 rods. Fortunately, I'm safe. So just be careful out there. Strap stuff down. I guess I could shameless plug. I opened up a web store, an e-store called Tackletech 3D. It's tackletech3d.com. I'm printing kayak accessories, things to help outfit your boat. I'm also taking, custom requests. If you guys have any ideas of stuff you want me to build for your boat, let me know. Check out my website, tackletech3d.com. And, you could help me out, purchase something. If not, it's cool. Just stay safe. But other than that, that's all I got, guys.
Well, thanks, John. And I'm glad you're okay, first and foremost. A lot of great advice there. And we harp on PFDs a lot in EKF. It doesn't quite, unfortunately, hit home until it happens to you. But when it does, you kind of realize, like, it doesn't matter how good of a swimmer you are. It doesn't matter how comfortable you are in water. Like, that stuff gets crazy. So, glad you're okay, John. And if folks are curious about his website, definitely check it out. I use one of his trays. I use one of the John's trays on my Take 2. It's fantastic. It has gotten me out of just throwing everything in a cup holder, which is a terrible way to organize because you're not organized. If everything's in there, it's getting tangled on it. So definitely check it out. It is some cool stuff. Todd, I want to give you a chance as well to give any shout outs to sponsors or anything before we close up, or any promo shout outs to people, whatever you'd like to do before we.
I'd just like to say thank you to you guys again for running the trail. I don't have any sponsors, but we'll see. And just keep it up, and I'm looking forward to this weekend at Candlewood. Hopefully I can cob something together and put up a respectable 2-day limit, and then we'll start the off season with the excitement for the great schedule that you have for next year.
No, appreciate that, Todd. Awesome. Yeah, and wish you the best of luck for next week. Hope everything goes well for you, and you'll figure something out, I'm sure. Again, you guys be sure to take a look at John's website, Tackletech 3D. Help him out. Help him recover some of what he lost. That, as somebody who's had that happen as well, it is a really strange feeling to lose things that you've spent years acquiring. It's a tough thing. It's tough flipping in general. You start. I don't know. For me, it was like, am I ever gonna kayak fish again? You do have to kind of get back on the horse. But some of these, some of the stuff we get over the years, I don't think we quite realize, probably on purpose, how much money we spend in the sport. In this chasing this crazy obsession that we have. So, please take some time to help John out with that if you can, or take a look at his site. So thank you all. Thank you, Todd, for being on here. We appreciate it. And again,
thanks, Todd.
Best of luck to you next week. And hopefully we see you there, and we'll talk soon. Thanks, everybody.
Alrighty. Thank you.
All right, guys. Have a wonderful night.
Take care.